Hello, today I'll be installing the CyberArk Central Credential Provider. My goal in this video is to configure the Qualys Cloud Platform to retrieve secrets using the Central Credential Provider service. To achieve this, first I'll be installing two Central Credential Provider servers. They'll be placed behind a load balancer. In my case, I'll be using an Azure load balancer. I'll then go to the CyberArk web portal and I'll set up applications to support what I'm trying to achieve. I'll then go and create a safe and configure the required safe permissions to make this work. I'll then add an account so that we've got a test account to retrieve a secret from. And then I'll use PowerShell to access the secret of the account we add. And then I'll configure certificate authentication using a Active Directory PKI so we can do certificate authentication when retrieving secrets from the Central Credential Provider. And then I'll test accessing those secrets using both PowerShell and Curl. So you've got two examples of how that would work. And then finally, I'll set up the Qualys Cloud Platform so that it can retrieve secrets from the Central Credential Provider and perform its security scans on devices within the environment. So here's a diagram of what we're trying to achieve. Today I'll be installing the two CCP servers over here, and we've got a load balancer in Azure. I won't show you how that's configured today, but it can be any sort of load balancer. There are requirements that you need to follow around the load balancer. The CCP servers will need to communicate with the Vault on port 1858, so that's this orange line here, and the CCP requests will be done over HTTPS, so that's this green line here. So that's representing the HTTPS port 443. I'll be also in this video making requests to the load balancer from my workstation to perform some tests with PowerShell and things like that. But ultimately our goal is to use the Qualys Cloud Platform security scanner, make queries to our CCP service. And now with that all said, I will head over to the lab and set this up. Okay, I'm on the workstation. The first thing I'll do is set the installer user password by going to Identity Administration, Core Services, then Users here, All Service Users, Installer User. Set the password. We'll also need the installer username later on, so I've documented that off my screen, so I don't need this anymore, so I'll close this. Next, we'll need to go to the marketplace and download the CyberArk Credential Provider. I've already done this ahead of time, but I'll provide this link in the description. So I'll head over to the first CyberArk Credential Provider server and install what's needed. And I'm logged into the first server. I'll open up Server Manager to install IIS. Click Manage up here. We'll add roles and features. And down to Server Roles here. We'll select Web Server IIS, accept the defaults there. Further down here in the role services, it's important to follow the documentation. So what you'll need is, further down here, I'll select underneath security, the IIS client certificate mapping authentication. This isn't in the documentation, and this is because not everyone uses certificate authentication. So I'm going to select that because I'll need that later on. And further down here under the management tools and the IIS 6 Metabase compatibility, we need to tick that. And I skipped over application development. We'll need to come back to there and select a few things in there. We need the .NET extensibility 4.x, ASP.NET 4.8, and ensure these two are ticked as well. So just go over that again. So I've ticked the IIS client certificate mapping authentication. These tick boxes here, and down here I've selected this tick box. I'll press next, install. And that's finished. I'll press close. I'll open up IIS from the Tools menu here. I'll expand this out and we'll go to sites here and the default website. I'm going to edit the bindings on this. And what I'll do next is I'll pause the video here and I'll go offline and I'll create a Let's Encrypt certificate so we can encrypt the CCP traffic. And just like that, here we have our binding. So this was created via a script using the Win ACME. I might make a separate video on this in the future, but the reason why I wanted this certificate here is so that when I set up an application called Qualys later on, the verification will work because it's publicly signed. Anyway, I'll get out of here and we'll remove the port 80 binding because we don't need that. So just remove that and we'll click close. Just minimize IIS and the server manager. And I'll go to the file explorer and we'll open up CyberArk here. And I'll just extract this now. I'll just extract it into this folder here. And we want the Central Credential Provider. I'll just extract that. And again, it's important to make sure this is a short path, so I'll just clear all this out. And I might put it in CyberArk as well. First, we'll need to install the Central Credential Provider for Windows 64, and we'll run this setup as administrator. Press next. Set the license agreement. Put something in here. Let's do a typical installation. And in my case, I'm using Privileged Cloud, so this is the vault address for that. If you're using self-hosted, of course, this will be the internal vault server. Because this is Privileged Cloud, we'll put in the installer username and the installer password we set earlier. And I'll let this reboot. And we'll open up IIS. We'll expand this out here. We'll go to application pools. We should delete these two pools that are created by default. We don't need them, so we'll just remove them. And we can't delete the default app pool, but we'll create our own application pool for the Central Credential Provider. So we'll just call that CCP. And we'll press OK. And we'll close this. We'll open up the file explorer and we'll go to CyberArk, CCP, and the Central Credential Provider web service. And we'll run the setup as administrator. Press next. This will go in the default website and we'll use the default virtual directory, but the application pool I will use is CCP. I'll press next. Next again. Close that, and we don't need this anymore, so we'll close that. Next, I'll open up IIS, and we'll just expand this out here and go to the default website. If I edit the bindings here, and we'll go to this binding here, and we'll press edit. What I've found in my testing, when testing with Qualys, I need to have this ticked. I'll provide some links in the description of why that's the case. There might be a time in the future where we don't need to tick this, so just research the documentation if that's still required. I'll just tick this for now and click OK, and I'll close that. And we'll go to the AIM web service here, and we'll go to SSL settings. Tick require SSL. And in my case, I'm going to leave this as accept for the time being because I'll do some tests in a moment where I don't use certificate authentication and then I'll move it up to required to lock it down, so I always have to supply certificates when making requests to the central credential provider. So we'll just leave that as accept for now. I'll hit apply, and I'll go back to the AIM web service, and I'll click on configuration here. And in this menu, we'll expand out web server here, security, authentication, and IIS client certificate mapping authentication. We'll just enable this. And we're going to do many-to-one certificate mappings. And so we'll just click on this line here, and there's little 3 dots that we'll click on over here. And we'll press add. And we'll give it a description. Give it a name. And underneath the rules here, select that, and I'll click add here. And then here we need to provide the information for our internal CA, in my case. So I'll just open up PowerShell here. Go cert lm.msc. Go to the trusted root certificate authorities and certificates. And this is the certificate authority for this internal domain. So I'll just open this certificate here, and I'll put this just over here for the time being. So the certificate field that we'll match this to is the issuer. The certificate subfield will be CN. And the match criteria will be the certificate here. So if I go to the details tab in the certificate, and if we click on issuer here, we can copy the CN here. I'll just put that in there like that. And then we can close this, and apply that. And I'll just come over here and I'll restart IIS as well. Let's clean this up. And I'll pause the video here. I'll go offline and I'll do the same steps on the second server, and I'll come back. Okay, I've completed all the steps that I did on CCP1, and we've done that on CCP2. I'll just minimize this, and I'll switch back to the workstation. And if I go to System Health here, in the Secrets Management Portal section here, I'll click on that, we can see the 2 central credential providers connected and online. Next, I'll head down to Applications, and we'll add an application. And we need to use this name here. I'll put that in the description. And I'll put this in the applications location. I'll press add. And we'll go to the allowed machines, and I'll add here. And the IPs for the 2 CCP servers are these ones here. This one. And this one. The reason why we do that is so we lock down this web service to only the CyberArk Credential Provider servers. We'll press back. And when you create an application, by default, you need to search for them. By default, this will be blank. So if you press search, and we can do a blank search, we can see the application here. I'll add another application. And what I'll be doing later on in this video is setting up Qualys with CyberArk. So for now, we'll just call this app-Qualys. And again, I'll put this in the applications folder here. We can apply other settings if we need to, but this is a test environment, so we'll just add that now. And with the allowed machines, I'll add them here. And I'll add in the workstation because I'll do some testing from this workstation. That one there. And I'll add in another IP, which will be this one here. It's a .47. And this is the Qualys scanner IP. So I'll just add that now for future reference. And I'll press back. And like I said before, we need to press search to find all the applications. I'll now go and create a safe. I'll create the safe. We'll give it a name. And I'll just press skip and create safe for now. Search for that safe to make it easier. We'll click on this safe here and we'll go to members. We'll press add members again. And we'll go back to system component users. I'll type in app. And here's the app-Qualys that we just made before. Again, we'll select everything in access, but this time, under Safe Management and Monitoring, we'll go to View Safe Members, and we'll also come down to Workflow and Access Safe without confirmation. We'll add that. Then we'll click on Add Members again. Go to System Component Users, and we'll search for PROV for provider, and I'll select both of these. They're the two Central Credential Provider server or application component users. Again, we need everything in access selected. We'll come down to Safe Management and Monitoring, and we'll tick the View Safe Members as well as the Access Safe without confirmation. I'll add that. So there's all the permissions there. Of course, we could add other users. For now, I'm just going to allow only my account to be able to access this safe. And if we go back to the accounts view, add an account. This will be Windows. I'll use this platform here. And the CCP Qualys safe. Put in our Active Directory domain name. His name. Password. Boss. And I'll hit add. Just search for that account. I'll just favorite that now. And I'll come into here and I'll just press verify. I've refreshed, it looks like that didn't work. And that's because I must have put in the wrong password. So what I'll do is I'll press reconcile. If I go to the details tab, the reconcile account is automatically added from a previous video. I showed you how we did that. But I'll just go back to the overview tab and I'll press refresh. There we are, the CPM reconciled that password. And I'll just press verify. And that's been verified, so that's good. And I've just realized I made a mistake. If I go to the details tab and go to the account name, this is a really long string. What's helpful if you make the account name something more simple, and if I edit this account, I'll come down to the account name here, and I'll just make it the same as the username. You could of course use something else that's unique and easy to type out. So I'll just press save on that. And if we go to the details tab, there's our username. and our account name here is shortened as well. Because we've just made a number of changes within the CyberArk platform, it's a good idea to go over to the credential provider server and restart the services. I'll just do that now. We'll open up services and the CyberArk application password provider. We'll restart that. And I'll open up IIS and I'll restart that. I'll switch back to the workstation. And now I'll open up PowerShell ISE. And here's a simple script on how you could query the CyberArk credential provider. So what we're doing is looking for that object, that account we just created, using this the CyberArk credential provider 1 and that app ID that we created in the application section. So of course, if I just run all this, we get the response along with the current password. So the content is the password. And of course, we want to secure this request further by using certificate authentication. I'll just go and set that up now by heading over to the domain controller in my case, where the certificate authority is. And here I've got the certification authority, and we'll go to the right click on this certificate templates here and we'll manage. We'll come down to the user certificate here, and I'm going to duplicate this template. Go to the general tab here and we'll call this user-CyberArk CCP. You can choose what validity period you want to make here. I'll just leave it as 1 year. And of course, in your environment, you can choose what validity period you would like. But I'll go to the cryptography tab. I'll make this 4096. And over in the request handling, it's important to have the allow private key to be exported, because I'll export this, import this into Qualys later on in the video. That's pretty much all I need to select for now, but I'll click OK. And I'll close this. I'll right click on this white space here and go new certificate template to issue. And we'll look for the user-CyberArk CCP. That's done. So I'll switch back to the workstation. And in here, we'll type in cert mgr.msc. So this is a local, it's not the local computer certificates, it's the user certificate, so the current user. So I'm just going to request a new certificate, use Active Directory, and we'll tick this one here. This is a template we just created, and I'll press enroll. Finish that, and here's our certificate. So what we can do is right click on this and go open, go to the details tab and get the serial number here. I'll just copy this serial number. We'll go back to CyberArk, come down to applications, press search, and here's our app Qualys. And underneath authentication here, we'll select add, and then certificate serial number. And I'll paste that in here. So just remember, a certificate serial number is different to the thumbprint. If I come back to here, so this is a serial number, the thumbprint is different. That's this one down here. Okay, so it's the serial number was what we need. So I'll just add that there. And since this has been added, I'll go back to the CCP1 server and restart the services. So our next goal is to use certificate authentication when making our API request for our Qualys password. So we need the thumbprint of the certificate. So if I just run this command here, we can get the thumbprint of that certificate. So this is just a nice easy way to get that thumbprint. I'll just copy that and come back to the PowerShell here, and we'll type in dash thumbprint, or certificate thumbprint I should say, and then in quotes put in your certificate thumbprint. So if I select all of that now and run that, we can see we're getting the password. So that's good. I should also point out we didn't need to install this certificate on the CyberArk Credential Provider server because that server trusts this certificate authority. If you're using some other self-signed certificate or some other certificate that wasn't signed by the internal CA, you of course would need to install that certificate on the CCP server. And what I'll do next is I'll just change this address to the second server, and I'll run this again, and we can see that that request still went through. So that tells me that the second server is configured correctly. Now that we've tested both servers are working, this is where you would set up your load balancer. Offline, I've created a load balancer in Azure to load balance both CCP1 and CCP2. So I'll just type in CyberArk CCP, and if I run that, we get a response. So every load balancer is different. It's important to look at the documentation on what you need to do and consider for load balancers. So I'll put some links in the description of where you can find information on that. So my next goal is to export this certificate for the application we need to use it for. So if I go back to the certificate manager here, we'll go to all tasks, go to export. Press next. Yes, we want to export the private key because that's required when we make the request for certificate authentication. And you can leave this, include all certificates in the certification path. And that's just in case you've got intermediate and root certificates, which is quite common. So I'll just leave that ticked. And I'll put a password on this certificate. Call it export. Like that. I'll just go to that file location. Now I'm going to do the next part on a Linux machine. So I've got WinSCP open here, and I'm going to transfer this exported PFX file to a Linux machine that I'm going to test with. And I've already SSH'd onto that here already. So if I type in ls, there's that export.pfx file. So the reason why I wanted this on a Linux machine is this, and it's because it has the OpenSSL command there, as well as the curl command there as well. That's not installed by default in Windows, so I'm just finding this as an easier method to do the next step. We also need to add in the IP address because I'm going to do a test in a moment, IP AWDR. We need to add in the IP address of this Linux server. Back in CyberArk here, if I go to the allowed machines, we'll add that in here. And I'll go in and restart the services. On CCP1, I'll just restart that. So IS. On CCP2, I'll restart the service there as well as IIS. You don't have to restart the services every time, it's just because I want to test this quickly. And back on the Linux server, we'll just type in ls, and there's that export.pfx file as we transferred using WinSCP. If I run this command here, so this will use the OpenSSL command, and it will use the export.pfx file. We'll then convert that to a cert.pen file, and when we don't want, we want all the nodes, which includes the root certificate, intermediate if they exist, as well as the certificate. And the no keys means it's not going to export the private key. So I'll run that. That's the password we used when we encrypted that PFX file there. Now if we do an ls on that now, we've got the cert.pem file here. I'm just going to use VI to edit that cert.pem file, and I'm just going to remove all the extra information around the certificates. So pressing DD every time I want to delete a line, and down further, so that is also included here. So this bottom section here is the root certificate in my case, and as this top section here is the certificate. So we'll save that, and we will also run the next command, which is this one here. So this command is going to grab the export.pfx and convert it to a key.pem file. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but we're not going to include the certificates, which means it will only include the private key. So I'll run that. We'll provide the password we used to extract the certificate earlier. Put that new password in, but I'll use the same one. Verify that. Now I've got the cert.pem and the key.pem. If I'll just use VI and we'll open up the key.pem file. And again, I'm just going to delete this top section here by pressing DD on all those lines. And I'll save that. And now I can use the curl command to test this out. So the curl command, we can use the cert switch to grab the cert.pem file, and the key switch to grab the key.pem file in my case. And we're using a very similar string to what we used in PowerShell. So I'll press enter on that, put in our passphrase for this key.pem file. I might have typed in something wrong there. And as we can see here, it's got all the information that we needed. So that's good. There is a handy verbose switch. If you type in -v at the end here, that can give you some extra information. There we are there. So we'll just leave that there. So next we'll go and configure the Qualys platform. It's important to remember this IP here, that 0.47 was the Qualys scanner in my environment, and I've logged into Qualys ahead of time, and I have made a scan offline, but I'll show you how to set up the authentication. If we click on this new button here and go to Authentication Vaults, go New, and then CyberArk AIM. For this CyberArk, we'll get the application ID, this one. The safe will be the safe we made earlier, and the URL will be this format here. This is where we need to provide the certificate and private key that we created earlier. So I'll go back to this machine and we'll cut out the certificate. Get the private key. We'll provide the password and we'll press save. We'll close that. And now we'll press new and then operating system Windows. And we'll give this a title. So we're going to do domain, and we'll leave this domain type as NetBIOS. You can select others here, but we'll use user selected IPs in my case. put in the NetBIOS domain name, select authentication vault here. Our username will be this one here. We're going to be using CyberArk AIM. We'll press this select button here and select the CyberArk CCP that we created earlier. The folder that the account is in is typically always will be the root account, the root folder, and the file or object will be in this case I named the account the same name as the username. Further down in here we just leave the defaults. We'll come over to assets. I'm going to select an asset group. And I've already created an asset group called workstations. I'm going to scan the WS1 in my case, which is the 0.11. Save that. I'll come back to the scans tab here, and I'll click on this little drop down menu here and press relaunch. I'm going to use this Qualys Scanner 1 here. And I'm doing a scan on the workstations asset group. So I'll press launch. And as we can see now, it's running. The scan is now finished after 5 minutes. I'll press view results here. And if we expand this out here, we can see it used this account here to run the scan. I'll close that and head back to Privilege Cloud. So this was a real world scenario where you might have an external application that needs to get a highly privileged account from CyberArk. What I'll do now is I'll just tidy up this. We don't need the Windows machine here anymore, or the Linux test machine, so I'll delete those two. And we're left with only the Qualys scanner service. Obviously, if you had more than one Qualys scanner, you'd add in multiple IPs here. And I'll head over to the accounts view as well, and I'll select this account here, and I'll change the password since I've revealed it on this video. And while that's rotating, I'll head over to the CCP1 server, and I've set this to require for client certificates. You would only select this if all your applications are configured for certificate authentication. If you had some applications that didn't have certificate authentication configured, you would have to set this back to accept. And that password's rotated. I'll finish the video here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.